Welcome back, guys. Equity Podcast, Barrick here. Special guest over there. Talking varied, not random. What we hear a lot of times when people are starting at the gym and doing CrossFit and whatnot is that the workouts are random, and we're not doing that at all. They're varied, not random. And we alluded to this a little bit in the podcast that we did with Dave, where we talked about kind of like our philosophy on how we do our programming. And one of the things that we mentioned in there was movement patterns. And that's what we're going to talk today about is our movement patterns. So when we have what we do is we program in 2-week blocks. And during that 2-week block, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we're hitting a bunch of different factors. We're trying to make sure that we hit different time domains. We're trying to hit heavy and light. We're trying to hit weightlifting and gymnastics and monostructural. We're trying to hit all of these things. And one of the other things that we're trying to make sure that we hit is different movement patterns. And you can just Google movement patterns and a bunch of different versions will come up, but this is what we use for our movement patterns in-house. So what we're looking for, these are the big ones. It's squat, it's hinge, rotational, push, pull, midline, and cyclical. Those are the big ones that we're using. And a lot of them are kind of self-explanatory, but some of them are a little like, what's that? So we're gonna kind of just break them down in a little bit. But first, I want to tell you about like how we use these. So what we're looking for is over those 2 weeks, we want to make sure that we're hitting all of these. And some of them we want to make sure that we're hitting them every week or multiple times a week. And when we do that, when we make sure we're hitting these movement patterns, all of a sudden when you start looking at the programming over a longer period of time, you're going to realize that it's not random, that we're partnering certain movements together for a reason, and we are seeing certain movements spread out throughout the week for a reason. So for example, like if we do wall balls one day and then down the road we hit thrusters, like those are two similar movement patterns. We have a squat with a vertical press. So even though we might not do thrusters every single week, you would see a thruster and a wall ball each week, something like that, or that type of movement pattern. So all because it's two different movements, they're still working a very similar thing. Now, by changing the load, it might be a little bit different, but the movement pattern is still the same. Some of the other factors might be different. So let's go down. That's kind of how we use it, and that's how it's not necessarily random. It's varied. We're still hitting these patterns, but we're hitting these patterns using different exercises, different movements, such as the wall ball and the thruster. So the first one is the squat, right? I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. We're crease the hip, below top of the knee. So any movement that does that is a squat. So your back squats, your overhead squats, your Bulgarian split squats, all of those. And some of these also might hit multiple of these. Some movements might hit multiple pieces of it. The next one is a hinge, right? So we got kettlebell swings, we got deadlifts, we got Romanian deadlifts, we got rowing. That's a hinge as well. So hinging movements, hips back. Then we have our rotational movements. These are movements that are unilateral. Like a one-arm kettlebell swing can also be rotational, but it's also a hinge movement, right? A little bit of both. So any type of unilateral movement or any type where we're going side to side. So you can think Russian twists, you can think single arm kettlebell work. And then carries would be in this list as well. So when you are walking or carrying something, you're shifting your weight from side to side. So there is some rotational work in that as well. So farmer carries, front rack carries, that type of thing, sandbag carries. And then also that's going to work. One of our other ones is midline. That's one of our other movement patterns, and that's in there as well. Our next one is push, right? We need to push things, and we break this into two different spaces. We have our horizontal push, think of bench press, we're pressing away from our chest, and then we have a vertical press where we're pressing up to the ceiling. And then we have the same thing for pulling, right? We have pulling to our pulling towards our chest, and we have pulling from a top and then pulling ourselves up. So two different pulling, horizontal and vertical as well. And then the last two, we have the midline. So we can think planks, sit-ups, and that can be a GHD sit-up, any type of midline work. And then we have cyclical. So you can kind of think monostructural with that. Running, rowing, skiing, all those type of movements. Even burpees in theory could get like that. That can also be a little bit of a hinge, depending on how you're doing them, or a squat. So those are our primary movement patterns, and what we're trying to do in our program is we're trying to make sure that we're hitting all of those. We want to hit all the different planes of movement. Some of the rotational work, that is in unilateral work, or moving side to side, that is where the gym part can be a little tough, because what we're looking for is things that are measurable and repeatable, and doing things that are a lot of side to side, they're very hard to be measurable and repeatable. Like think about a thruster, full squat, crease hip below top of knee, full extension at the top. If you do something like a skier lunge or something, like what is the standard on that, and how do you define that? That can be a little bit weird. So a lot of cutting in outside, like that's more like training type stuff, like sport specific stuff, and we don't get into that as much. But what we want to do is, using these movement patterns, we can help make those sport specific things, or those things, a lot easier and safer, and be more explosive in them as well. So that's a little breakdown into like how we think about our movement patterns and what we're doing, how this is one way we make sure that our program is not random. There's a lot of other layers to this, and over the coming weeks and months we'll keep breaking that down and hopefully give you guys some insight into what we do and how we do it. If you have any specific questions on the movement patterns and how we use them, or what they are exactly, let me know. Shoot me a message, comment, whatnot. If this was helpful and you're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense, let us know. If you like seeing stuff like this. Remember, invest in yourself. Thank you. Cheers.